T's funny how the foundation of a life, a marriage, can feel like solid bedrock 1 minute and then turn to sand the next. For 12 years, my foundation was Mark. We weren't just married, we were a unit, a team. Everything we did together. We built our life from the ground up, brick by painful, joyful brick. We bought our first house, a small starter home that we painted ourselves, laughing as we got more paint on our clothes than on the walls. We adopted a rescue dog, a goofy golden retriever named Gus who filled the silence with the happy thump-thump-thump of his tail. We planned our future on Sunday mornings, sitting at our kitchen table with mugs of coffee, spreadsheets open on my laptop, and dreams swirling in the air between us. Dreams of a bigger house with a yard for Gus, of trips to Italy to see the art I'd only read about in books, of a comfortable retirement where we could just be together. The cornerstone of that future, the very symbol of our unity, was our joint bank account. It wasn't just a financial tool. It was a testament to our trust. The day we got married, we walked into the bank, hand in hand, and merged our financial lives as completely as we had merged everything else. "What's mine is yours, what's yours is mine," he'd said, and I believed him with every fiber of my being. I was the planner, the one who managed the budget. Not because he was bad with money, but because I enjoyed it. I loved seeing our savings grow, earmarking funds for our next big adventure, knowing that every dollar was another step toward the future we were building. There was no his money or my money. It was just our money, flowing in from our paychecks and out toward our shared goals. It was complete transparency, complete trust. Or so I thought. I saw every transaction, every bill paid, every dollar saved. I thought I knew our financial landscape like the back of my hand. The first crack in that foundation wasn't a dramatic earthquake. It was a hairline fracture, something so small you could easily miss it if you weren't looking. It was a Tuesday night. Mark was supposedly working late, something that was happening more frequently, but he was up for a promotion, so I brushed it off as ambition. I was doing my monthly budget review, a ritual I found soothing. I'd light a candle, put on some quiet music, and categorize our spending. It was predictable. Mortgage, utilities, car payments, groceries from our local Trader Joe's, the occasional splurge on a nice dinner out. But this time, something was different. Tucked between a payment for our electricity bill and a charge from Amazon was a line item that made me pause. $47.16. The charge was from a place called Greenfield Market. I stared at it. Greenfield. I'd never heard of it. We lived in Northwood, a suburb where I knew the name of every grocery store within a 20-mile radius. Greenfield was a town about 45 minutes away, on the other side of the county. We had no reason to go there. We had no friends there, no family. It was just a place on a map we sometimes drove through to get to the state park. I clicked on the transaction details. It was a debit card purchase, made in person, last Thursday at 1:15 p.m. I frowned. Last Thursday, Mark had told me he was having a long lunch meeting with a client near his office, which was in the opposite direction of Greenfield. It was weird, but not alarming. Not yet. There could be 100 explanations. Maybe he did have a client in Greenfield. Maybe he bought something online and the merchant's processor was based there. Maybe it was just a simple mistake, the bank mislabeling a transaction. When he got home that night, I mentioned it casually as we were getting ready for bed. "Hey, honey," I said, trying to sound breezy. I was doing the budget and saw a weird charge from a place called Greenfield Market. Do you know what that is? It was for about $47. He didn't even look up from his phone, just gave a little shrug. Don't recognize the name. Must be one of those online things, you know how they route payments through weird places. Or maybe it was that new software I bought for work, and they miscoded it. He finally looked at me, a soft, reassuring smile on his face. "Don't worry about it, babe. If it's a mistake, the bank will catch it." And I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly. He was my Mark, my steady, reliable Mark. The man who held my hand during scary movies and always remembered to buy my favorite ice cream. To doubt him felt like a betrayal in itself. So I pushed it down. I told myself I was being silly, obsessive. It was just one small, insignificant charge. It meant nothing. But the seed was planted. It was a tiny, nagging splinter in the back of my mind. And over the next few weeks, that splinter started to fester. I found myself watching him a little more closely. I noticed how he'd angle his phone away from me when a text came in. How his late nights at the office often left him smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't mine. I tried to ignore it, to chalk it up to my own paranoia. A paranoia sparked by one stupid $47 transaction. But the feeling wouldn't go away. It was a low hum of anxiety under the surface of our perfect life. The end of the next month came, and with it, another budget review. My hands trembled slightly as I logged into our joint account. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I would log in, see nothing out of the ordinary, and finally let this go. I would put the doubt back in its box and bury it. But my heart was pounding in my chest, a frantic drumbeat of premonition. I took a deep breath, clicked on the statement, and began to scroll, praying I would find nothing, praying I was just a crazy, suspicious wife. But I already knew, deep in my gut, that I wouldn't be that lucky. I was looking for another crack in the foundation, and I had a terrible feeling I was about to find a chasm. My screen glowed in the dark room, the neat columns of numbers feeling less like a budget and more like a verdict waiting to be read. My own breathing was loud in my ears. I scrolled down, past the familiar names, Consolidated Edison, Verizon, our mortgage company, my eyes scanning for anything out of place. First, there was nothing. A wave of dizzying relief washed over me. I'd been wrong. I was a paranoid, untrusting wife, and Mark was right. It was a one-time glitch. I almost laughed out loud, a hysterical, shaky sound. I was ready to close the laptop and go to bed, to apologize to him in the morning for the silent accusation I had harbored in my heart. But my cursor hovered, my hand frozen. Something compelled me to look closer. A single charge, almost hidden between a payment for Gus's dog food subscription and my own student loan payment. There it was again. Greenfield Market. This time for $62.34. The relief that had filled my lungs just moments before vanished, replaced by an icy dread that started in my stomach and spread through my veins. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a glitch. Once is an anomaly. Twice is the beginning of a pattern. My fingers flew across the keyboard, my previous calm replaced by a frantic, obsessive energy. I went to the search bar on the bank's website and typed in the word Greenfield. The page reloaded, and my world tilted on its axis. It wasn't just 2 charges. It was a list, dozens of them stretching back for months. Every single week, like clockwork. Greenfield Market. The amounts varied from $40 to nearly $100. It was a weekly grocery bill. But that wasn't all. There was more. So much more. There were ATM withdrawals, always for exactly $100 in cash, from a Bank of America branch in downtown Greenfield. These happened every other Friday. There were charges from a CVS pharmacy, also in Greenfield, once a month. I clicked on one, my heart hammering against my ribs. The charge was for a prescription copay. Whose prescription? Mark didn't take any regular medication, and mine were filled at our local pharmacy. Who was he getting medicine for in a town 45 minutes away? My mind reeled, trying to assemble the pieces into a picture that made any sense. I was grasping at straws, desperately trying to construct an innocent explanation. Maybe he had an old friend from college who lived there, someone who had fallen on hard times and Mark was helping him out, buying his groceries, getting his medicine. Mark was a good man, a generous man. He would do something like that. But why wouldn't he tell me? Why the secrecy? We never kept secrets from each other, especially not about money. The very idea was antithetical to everything we had built. What's mine is yours. The words echoed in my head, mocking me. I pushed aside the desperate, hopeful theories and kept digging. My methodical budgeting skills, once a source of pride and security, now felt like a curse, a tool for my own self-destruction. I opened a new spreadsheet, my movements robotic. I went back further, month by month. 3 months, 6 months, a year. The Greenfield charges started 10 months ago. They were smaller at first, less frequent. A single grocery run, 1 ATM withdrawal. But they had grown steadily, becoming a regular, integrated part of our monthly spending that I had somehow completely overlooked. I felt a wave of nausea. How could I have missed this? All this time, a secret life was being funded right under my nose, and I was the one balancing the checkbook. The deception was so blatant, so audacious. He hadn't even bothered to hide it, confident in my blind trust. Then my search expanded. If he was hiding Greenfield, what else was he hiding? I started scrutinizing every single transaction from the past year that I didn't immediately recognize. Most were explainable online purchases I'd forgotten about, a new restaurant we tried. But then I found others. A recurring monthly charge for $19.99 to something called Starfall, an educational website for young children. We didn't have children. We had talked about it years ago, but decided our life with Gus was full enough. Another charge caught my eye. A one-time purchase of $158.42 from a store called Little Sprouts Boutique. I Googled it. It was an upscale children's clothing store. My blood ran cold. The most damning discovery came from 3 months ago. A charge for $250 to a place called Wonder World Toys. I remembered that day perfectly. Mark had received a small bonus from work, and he told me he was putting it directly into our vacation fund. We'd celebrated that night, toasting to our future trip to Italy. But he hadn't put the money into savings. He'd spent it at a toy store, $250, on toys for a child that wasn't ours. The spreadsheet on my screen was no longer just a list of numbers. It was a story of a secret life, written in debit card swipes and ATM withdrawals. This wasn't about helping a friend. This wasn't about a secret hobby. This was bigger, deeper, and infinitely more terrifying. The money was a breadcrumb trail, and it was leading to a conclusion my heart couldn't yet accept. The groceries, the pharmacy, the cash, the children's website, the clothes, the toys. It was a complete picture. He wasn't just visiting Greenfield. He was supporting someone there. He was funding a life there. I leaned back in my chair, the glow of the monitor illuminating the tears streaming down my face. The silence of the house was deafening. Gus was asleep at my feet, his soft snores the only sound. Our wedding photo sat on the desk, my smiling face pressed against Mark's. We looked so happy, so full of hope, so completely unaware of the chasm that was about to open beneath us. The man in that photo, the man I had loved and trusted for 12 years, was a stranger. And the life I thought we had built together was a lie, paid for with a joint account that funded not one, but two different realities. The shock was starting to wear off, replaced by something else. Cold, hard clarity. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I wasn't going to invent innocent excuses. I was going to follow this trail to its bitter end. I needed to know the truth. All of it. The woman who went to bed that night was not the same one who woke up the next morning. The tears had dried into a strange, cold resolve. The part of me that wanted to find an innocent explanation, that wanted to believe in the man I married, had died in front of that glowing laptop screen. In its place was a stranger, a woman I didn't recognize, whose only purpose was to uncover the full scope of this lie. I had become a reluctant detective in the archaeology of my own ruined marriage, and the digital breadcrumbs were my guide. My life split into two realities. By day, I was the loving wife. I made Mark his coffee in the morning, kissed him goodbye as he left for work, and asked about his day when he came home. I played my part flawlessly, a hollowed-out version of myself going through the motions. Every smile felt like a mask. Every touch was a lie. He'd tell me he loved me, and the words, which once felt like home, now sounded like nails being hammered into a coffin. But at night, after his breathing evened out into the steady rhythm of sleep, my true work began. The laptop became my command center. I moved beyond the joint bank account. That was just the starting point. I logged into our shared credit card portal, a place I rarely checked since we paid the balance in full from our checking account each month. The spending there was more sporadic, but the pattern was the same. Little charges, all pointing to Greenfield. A subscription to Disney Plus, which I knew for a fact we didn't have on our television. Payments to a local pizza place in Greenfield that did delivery. He was buying someone dinner, He was paying for their entertainment. He was building a life detail by detail with our money. The real breakthrough, however, came from the most mundane of places, our Amazon account. We'd shared it for years. It was a digital archive of our life together. The lawnmower we bought for our first house, the books I loved, the ridiculously expensive coffee maker he'd wanted for his birthday. I navigated to the order history, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. I scrolled past our familiar purchases, and then I saw them. Diapers. Size 4. A brand we'd never used because we never had a need for it. A box of baby formula. A pink toddler-sized bicycle helmet. A set of picture books about farm animals. The orders were interspersed with our own. A secret history hidden in plain sight. My hands were shaking. I felt a dizzying sense of vertigo, as if the floor had dropped out from under me. It was one thing to see numbers on a spreadsheet, but this was tangible. These were items for a real, living, breathing child. His child. Then I saw the detail that made my vision swim. Next to each of these purchases was the shipping information. I clicked on it, expecting to see our address, expecting that he had at least been clever enough to have the items shipped to our house and then transport them himself. He wasn't. There, saved in our list of shipping addresses, was a second address. 114 Maple Drive, Greenfield, a name and a place that meant nothing to me, yet everything to the man sleeping in my bed. My investigation took on a new, terrifying dimension. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about a place, a home. I copied the address and pasted it into Google Maps. The satellite view showed a quiet, tree-lined street, not unlike our own. I clicked, dragging the little yellow icon onto the road for Street View, and there it was, 114 Maple Drive. It was a small blue house with white shutters and a carefully tended garden out front. A cheerful yellow front door. There was a tricycle overturned on the lawn, a small plastic slide next to the porch. In the driveway sat a dark blue Honda Accord, the same model as the one Mark's mother drove. I zoomed in, my breath catching in my throat. On the porch, next to the front door, was a welcome mat. It was shaped like a smiling sun. I spent hours that night in a digital prison of my own making. I mapped his entire secret life. I took the address of the Bank of America where he withdrew cash, the CVS pharmacy, the Greenfield Market, and the little blue house on Maple Drive. They formed a neat triangle, a tight little geographic bubble of betrayal just a 45-minute drive away. I cross-referenced the dates and times of the transactions with our shared digital calendar. The Thursday afternoon ATM withdrawals perfectly matched his long lunch meetings with clients. The weekly grocery runs coincided with the evenings he claimed he had to stay late at the office to finish a report. It was all there, a meticulously documented chronicle of his deception. He hadn't just been cheating, he had been commuting to a second life. Living with this knowledge was a unique form of torture. I felt like a ghost in my own home, watching my husband, this complete stranger, as he moved through the life we had supposedly built together. He would laugh at something on TV, and I would wonder if he was laughing with her, too. He would complain about his day at work, and I would have to bite my tongue to keep from asking, "Which work? The one in your office? Or the one you do at 114 Maple Drive?" I was losing weight. Sleep offered no escape, as my dreams were haunted by the image of that little blue house and the tricycle on the lawn. I had all the digital proof a person could need. A mountain of financial data, an address, a clear and undeniable pattern of deception. But it wasn't enough. Staring at a screen felt removed, abstract. I needed to make it real. I needed to see it with my own eyes, to stand on that street and breathe the same air. I needed to see the house that my money, had helped secure. The digital breadcrumbs had led me this far. Now, I had to take the final step. The next time he told me he was working late, I wouldn't be sitting at home staring at a laptop. I would be in my car and I would be driving to Greenfield. For 3 days, I lived in a state of suspended animation. I had the address, the Google Street View image of the little blue house burned into my memory, but I couldn't bring myself to act. I was a scientist who had proven her horrifying hypothesis on paper but was terrified to look in the microscope and see the monster for herself. I needed one final push, One last piece of evidence so undeniable that it would propel me out the door and into my car. I got it on a Friday afternoon. Mark had just called, his voice laced with that familiar, fake exhaustion. "It's going to be another late one, babe. We're trying to close a huge deal before the weekend. I'll probably just grab a burger on the way home. Don't wait up for me." The lie was so practiced, so smooth. The old me would have cooed with sympathy. The new me felt a chill crawl up her spine. This was it. This was the night. Before I left, I felt an impulse to do one last sweep. Not of the checking account, I knew that story by heart. I logged into our primary savings account. This was our sacred space, the account we called the Future Fund. It held the down payment for the bigger house we dreamed of, the one with the big yard and the oak tree. We watched the balance grow with a shared sense of pride and excitement. We never touched it. It was a symbol of our discipline, of our commitment to the future we were building together. When the page loaded, my eyes went immediately to the balance. It was lower, significantly lower, about $50,000 lower than it should have been. My blood turned to ice. I scrolled through the transaction history, my breath held tight in my chest, and there it was, dated 8 months prior. A single, massive wire transfer, $50,000. The memo line was insultingly vague. Investment property transfer. Investment property. He had drained our future, our dream, and invested it. But not for us. My fingers, slick with a cold sweat, flew across the keyboard. I did a public property record search for 114 Maple Drive, Greenfield. The results loaded in seconds. Sold 8 months ago. The sale price was modest for the area. It would have required a down payment of around $50,000. The new owner listed was a holding company I'd never heard of. It was a transparent, clumsy attempt to hide his name from the deed, but the timing, the exact amount, it was all there. He hadn't just rented a place for his other life. He had bought a home with our dream house money. He had stolen our future to build one with them. That was the push I needed. The betrayal was so profound, so absolute, it vaporized any remaining hesitation. I grabbed my car keys, my movements sharp and precise. There were no tears, no hysterics, just a terrifying, hollow calm. The 45-minute drive to Greenfield passed in a blur. I don't remember the music on the radio or the cars I passed. I was on autopilot, my entire consciousness focused on the little blue dot of my GPS as it crawled toward the address that had haunted my nights. I drove past the Greenfield Market, its cheerful sign a mockery. I passed the CVS where he bought their prescriptions. This was his world. I was a tourist in the ruins of my own marriage. I found Maple Drive easily. It was just as the pictures had shown. Quiet, idyllic, lined with mature trees. I parked my car 2 houses down from number 114, under the cover of a large maple tree, its leaves just beginning to hint at the coming autumn. And I watched. The house was lit up from within, casting a warm, inviting glow into the twilight. It looked like a picture from a magazine, a perfect portrait of domestic bliss. For a moment, I felt a disorienting wave of jealousy and longing. That was the life I was supposed to have. My car was a dark, silent observation post. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. Then, the cheerful yellow front door opened. A woman stepped out onto the porch. She was younger than me, with long dark hair pulled back into a ponytail. She was pretty in a simple, unassuming way. She turned and said something back into the house, and a moment later, a little boy, no older than 3, came toddling out. He had a head of messy blonde curls, just like Mark's. He ran to the woman and hugged her legs, and she laughed and ruffled his hair. My heart stopped. It didn't break. It just stopped. It was one thing to see receipts for toys. It was another to see the child who played with them. And then it happened. A familiar car, Mark's silver Toyota Camry, turned onto the street and pulled into the driveway of the little blue house. The engine cut and he got out. But this wasn't the tired, stressed-out Mark who came home to me. This man was beaming. He dropped his briefcase on the driveway and opened his arms. The little boy shouted, "Daddy!" and ran straight into his embrace. Mark lifted him up, spinning him around in the air, and the boys' squeals of laughter echoed down the quiet street. The woman on the porch walked over to them, a soft, loving smile on her face. Mark, still holding the child in one arm, wrapped his other around her waist, pulled her close, and kissed her. It wasn't the perfunctory peck he gave me. It was a deep, lingering kiss, the kind you give to the person who is your entire world. He was home. Through the soundproof glass of my car, I watched the silent movie of his real life. The happy family, the loving wife, the adoring son. He had everything we had ever talked about wanting. He just had it with someone else. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't do anything. I just watched until they went inside, turning on the lights and closing the door on their perfect world, leaving me alone in the darkness. A profound, empty silence filled me. The love I had held for him for 12 years, the hope I had clung to, it all just evaporated. It wasn't there anymore. In its place was nothing. A vacuum. I put the car in drive, my movements slow and deliberate, and pulled away from the curb. I drove away from his home, from his family, from the smoldering wreckage of the life I thought was mine. I hadn't been seen, but I had seen everything. The investigation was over. The war was about to begin. The drive home was a study in absolute stillness. The roaring in my ears had subsided, replaced by a profound and terrifying silence in my mind. The part of me that had been screaming and crying for weeks was finally quiet. The woman who parked the car in our driveway was not the wife who had left it 2 hours earlier. I was made of ice and steel now. I walked into the house, my house, and the familiar scent of lemon cleaner and Gus's dog bed felt alien. Every object was a monument to a lie. Our wedding photo on the mantle, the two of us smiling on a beach in Mexico, seemed to mock me. The throw blanket on the sofa, the one we huddled under to watch movies, felt contaminated. This was not a home. It was a stage, and the play was over. I didn't storm through the house. I didn't throw things. My movements were calm, deliberate, and purposeful. I walked to my office, powered on the printer, and began to assemble my case. I printed the last 12 months of our joint checking account statements, taking a red pen and circling every single transaction in Greenfield. I printed the credit card bills with the pizza deliveries and the Disney Plus subscription highlighted in yellow. I printed the Amazon order summary for the diapers, the formula, and the pink bicycle helmet, the shipping address 114 Maple Drive, in a bold, black box. Finally, I printed the statement from our savings account, drawing a thick red line through the $50,000 wire transfer. I laid the documents out on our large oak kitchen table, the place where we'd shared thousands of meals, where we'd planned our future. I arranged them in a neat, undeniable timeline of his betrayal. This wasn't an accusation. It was an autopsy. I was sitting there in the dim light, a cup of untouched tea cooling in my hands, when I heard his key in the lock. He walked in, sighing theatrically. "What a day," he said, dropping his briefcase by the door. "I am absolutely drained." He came around the corner into the kitchen, ready to play his part, but he stopped short when he saw me, and the evidence spread out like a funeral shroud on the table between us. "What's all this?" he asked, his voice cautious. I didn't look at him. I stared at the papers. My voice, when it came out, was steady and devoid of any emotion. "How was Greenfield?" The question hung in the air. He let out a short, nervous laugh. "Greenfield? What are you talking about? I told you I was at the office. We had the Henderson deal." "Don't," I said, my voice cutting through his lie. "Don't lie to me anymore, Mark. Just for once, stop lying." He walked over to the table and picked up one of the bank statements, his eyes scanning the circled charges. He put it down and adopted a look of deep, loving concern. "Babe, are you feeling okay? You seem obsessed with this. It's a bank error. I really think you're letting stress get the better of you. Maybe we should talk about you taking some time off work." It was masterful, the immediate pivot. The problem wasn't his behavior. It was my sanity. I slid the Amazon order form across the table toward him. "And this? Is this a bank error too? Size 4 diapers, pink helmet, Shipped to 114 Maple Drive. Explain it. His composure flickered for a fraction of a second. I saw it in his eyes, a flash of pure panic. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by an indignant anger. I cannot believe this, he said, his voice rising. You've been spying on me? Hacking into my accounts? What is wrong with you? This is an insane violation of my privacy. Our marriage is supposed to be built on trust. The hypocrisy was so staggering it was almost breathtaking. Our marriage, I said, my voice dangerously low, was supposed to be built on a lot of things. I pushed the final document toward him. The savings account statement. $50,000, Mark. Our down payment. Our future. Gone. For your investment property. This was it. The final cornered move. He took a deep breath, his face a mask of weary resignation, as if I was the one causing all this pain. He launched into the lie he must have been rehearsing for months. Okay, he said, sitting down opposite me, trying to take my hand, though I pulled it away. You're right. I've been hiding something, but not what you think. He proceeded to spin a tale about a fictional cousin, a down-on-his-luck screw-up who had gotten a girl pregnant and was too ashamed to tell the family. Mark, in his infinite generosity, had stepped in to help. He was buying them groceries, helping with the baby, co-signing on a small house to give them a start. I was going to tell you, I swear, he said, his eyes pleading. I was just waiting for the right time. I didn't want to burden you with it. The money is an investment for us. They pay rent. It's all above board. I made a promise to keep it a secret. It was a good lie, a really good one. It was designed to prey on my empathy, to make me feel guilty for my suspicion, for cornering this good, noble man who was just trying to help his family. A year ago, I would have believed him. I would have dissolved into tears, apologizing for my lack of faith. But that woman was gone. The woman who sat before him now had seen the truth with her own eyes. I let the silence stretch out after his story was finished. I let him sit there in his carefully constructed fiction. Then I finally lifted my head and looked him directly in the eye. My gaze was flat, cold, and empty. That was a beautiful story, Mark, I said, my voice barely a whisper. You're a very, very good liar. I paused, letting the words sink in. But it doesn't matter. None of it matters. Because I was there tonight. I was in Greenfield. I watched the blood drain from his face. His confident mask of deceit crumbled into dust, revealing the panicked, pathetic man beneath. I saw you, I continued, each word a perfectly aimed stone. I saw you pull into the driveway. I saw you kiss her. I saw your son run into your arms when you got out of the car. I heard him call you daddy. The silence that followed was absolute. There were no more denials, no more gaslighting, no more twisted stories. There was nothing left but the sickening, ugly truth hanging in the air between us, exposed and rotting in the soft light of our kitchen. He just stared at me, his mouth slightly open, his eyes wide with the terror of being truly and completely seen. The silence in the kitchen was a living thing. It was thick and heavy, punctuated only by the frantic, shallow breaths of the man who had just been unmasked. Mark stared at me, his face a canvas of dawning horror. The smugness, the anger, the carefully crafted lies. It had all been stripped away. All that was left was a pathetic, cornered animal. My final words, I saw your son, were the kill shot. There was no defense against them, no lie big enough to cover the truth of a father holding his child. He didn't try to deny it again. He couldn't. He visibly deflated, sinking into the kitchen chair as if his bones had suddenly dissolved. He put his face in his hands, and a dry, racking sob escaped his lips. It wasn't a sound of remorse. It was the sound of being caught. For a long time he just sat there, shaking. I remained standing, my arms crossed, the pile of incriminating papers between us like a wall. I felt strangely detached, as if I were watching a scene from a movie. The grief and rage had burned out, leaving behind a cold, clear void. I wasn't his wife anymore. I was a prosecutor, and he was finally on the stand. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red and puffy. "Her name is Sarah," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. And then the dam broke. The whole sordid, pathetic story came pouring out of him in a torrent of excuses and self-pity. She was a paralegal at a firm his company had worked with on a project 2 years ago. It started with professional lunches, which bled into after-work drinks. He told me they were networking meetings. He fed me lines about building client relationships while he was building a second life. He painted himself as the victim, of course. He was feeling overwhelmed at work, unappreciated at home. He said Sarah just listened. She made him feel important. It was a textbook cheater's monologue. So cliché it would have been laughable if it hadn't been the narrative that had dismantled my entire world. The affair had been going on for 18 months. The pregnancy, he swore, was an accident. A broken condom, a moment of carelessness. He'd panicked. He told me how he had begged her to terminate it, offering to pay for everything, to take her on a trip anywhere she wanted to go. But she had refused. She wanted the baby. And Mark, my husband, the man who always claimed to be decisive and strong, was too much of a coward to walk away. He was too scared to lose me and too scared to abandon her and the child. So he chose the most cowardly path of all. He chose to have both. As he spoke, I started to understand the sheer scale of the deception. It was an enterprise. He had a second phone, a cheap prepaid burner he kept in his car. He had a different email address. He had constructed an entirely separate identity. And the cruelest cut of all was the story he had told Sarah. To her, he was a divorced man, tragically separated from a volatile and unstable ex-wife, me. He told her we were entangled in a bitter legal dispute over our house, which was why he couldn't sell it and move in with her permanently. He had painted me as a monster to justify his part-time presence in their lives. He made me the villain in a story I didn't even know I was in. The weekends he spent on business trips were weekends with them. The late nights at the office were family dinners in their little blue house. Every memory I had of the last 2 years was tainted. Every word he'd spoken was a potential lie. He talked about their son, Leo. He spoke his name with a twisted sort of reverence. He described the terror and the secret thrill of being there for his birth. A day he had called me from the office, complaining about a terrible migraine. He had 2 lives, running in parallel, and he was the frantic, exhausted engineer trying to keep the 2 trains from colliding. The $50,000 down payment for the house had been his grand gesture, a way to provide for them, to ease his own guilt. He had stolen the foundation of our future to build a foundation for his. When the confession finally trickled to a halt, he was openly weeping. Fat, ugly tears streamed down his face. He reached across the table, his hand trembling. "I'm so sorry, babe," he choked out. "I love you. You have to believe me. You are my life. This, Sarah, Leo, it was a mistake. A horrible, stupid mistake that just spun out of control. I'll end it. I swear. I will never see them again. We can fix this. Please, please don't leave me. I can't live without you." I stared at his outstretched hand. I looked at his tear-streaked face. This man I had loved since I was 22 years old. I searched within myself for any flicker of the old love, any ember of compassion or pity that he could perhaps fan back into a flame. But there was nothing. It was all gone. The space inside me was a cavern of cold, echoing emptiness. His pleas, his promises, they were meaningless. He wasn't sorry for what he did. He was sorry he got caught. He wasn't a tragic figure who had made a mistake. He was a meticulous architect of deceit. He hadn't just cheated. He had embezzled our life. I calmly pulled my hands back from the table and stood up. I looked down at him, this broken, weeping stranger in my kitchen. "There is no we anymore, Mark," I said, and my voice was the calmest it had been in months. It was the voice of absolute certainty. "There is nothing to fix." He looked up at me, his eyes wide with disbelief, still expecting a negotiation, a fight, a chance. I gave him none. "I want you to pack a bag," I said, my words clear and sharp as shattered glass. "And then I want you to get out of my house." His face cycled through a series of emotions right before my eyes. Disbelief was the first, a genuine shock that I would dare to give him, the master of our universe and order. It quickly morphed into desperate pleading as he started to relaunch his campaign of apologies and promises, his voice cracking. When he saw the flat, unmovable wall in my eyes, the pleading soured into a bitter, resentful anger. "You can't be serious," he spat. "After 12 years, you're just going to throw me out? Throw everything away?" The audacity of it, to frame me as the one throwing everything away, was so profound it almost made me laugh. I didn't. I just pointed toward the hallway. "Pack your bag, Mark." The next 20 minutes were the most surreal of my life. I sat at the kitchen table, a silent sentinel, as he moved through the house that was no longer his. I listened to the sounds of him opening and closing drawers in our bedroom, a room I knew I would never be able to sleep in again. He was a ghost, haunting the final moments of our life together. He eventually emerged with a single duffel bag, his face pale and drawn. He paused at the door, one last, pathetic attempt in his eyes. "Where am I supposed to go?" he asked, his voice small. I gave him a cold, empty stare. "I imagine 114 Maple Drive is available." The flicker of pain and fury in his eyes at my words gave me a grim, satisfying sense of victory. Then he was gone. I walked to the door, bolted it, and leaned against it, listening to the sound of his car starting and driving away. The silence he left behind wasn't sad or lonely. It was clean. It was the sound of a fever breaking. I did not cry. The time for tears was over. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation was still coursing through my veins, sharpening my thoughts into a singular focus: protection. The marriage was dead, but the war over our assets had just begun. He had proven he was a thief, and I would not let him steal another second or another dollar from me. My first call the next morning was not to my mother or my best friend. It was to a locksmith. As he worked, the metallic sound of the drill boring out the old locks was the sound of my old life being permanently excised. My second call was to schedule a consultation with the most ruthless divorce attorney I could find. Her name was Anya Davies, and her online reviews described her as a velvet-gloved shark. It was exactly what I needed. Walking into her polished, high-rise office felt like stepping into a different world. It was a world of power, of cool, calculated strategy. Anya Davies was in her 50s, impeccably dressed, with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. I didn't cry or tell her a sob story. I walked in and laid my stack of printed evidence on her mahogany desk just as I had on my kitchen table. "My husband of 12 years has a second family," I said. "He used our joint savings to buy them a house. This is my documentation." She listened intently as I walked her through the timeline, my voice as steady and emotionless as if I were giving a business presentation. I pointed out the recurring charges, the Amazon orders, the $50,000 transfer. I showed her the address and told her what I had seen with my own eyes. When I was finished, she leaned back in her leather chair, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across her face. "Well," she said, her voice smooth as silk, "he's made this rather easy for us, hasn't he?" For the next hour, she laid out the plan. It was the quiet war. "The heartbreak is your business," she told me, her tone kind but firm. "The money is mine. And right now, we need to cauterize the financial wound before he bleeds you dry." Step 1 was immediate and aggressive. She instructed me to go to the bank that afternoon, open a new checking and savings account in my name only, and transfer exactly half of the remaining funds from our joint accounts into my new ones. "It's marital property, so you're entitled to it," she explained. "This prevents him from draining the accounts out of spite. It's not hiding it, it's protecting it." Step 2 was filing for divorce. We would file immediately, citing adultery. But the real weapon, she said, was the financial claim: dissipation of marital assets. Every dollar he spent on her, the groceries, the toys, the rent, and especially that $50,000 down payment, will be considered an advance on his share of the settlement. We will add it all back to his column. He wasn't spending our money. He was spending his own future. The shark was showing her teeth. Step 3 was to hire a forensic accountant to go through every statement for the last 2 years to find anything I might have missed. We would leave no stone unturned. I left her office feeling a foot taller. The grief was still there, a cold stone in my gut, but it was now surrounded by something else. Purpose. Fury had been forged into a weapon. I drove directly to a different branch of our bank, the one across town. I sat down with a personal banker, my hands steady, my voice clear. I opened my accounts, the first ones in my adult life that were solely mine. Then came the transfer. Seeing that money, my half, my security, my future, move into an account he couldn't touch was the most terrifying and liberating moment of my life. It was a declaration of independence. That evening, I sat alone in my quiet, secure house. Mark had been calling and texting all day. A barrage of desperate pleas, angry accusations, and pathetic apologies. I ignored them all. I made myself a simple dinner and ate it at the kitchen table, the space now cleared of all the ugly evidence. I logged into my new online banking portal and stared at the balance. My money, my life, the quiet war had been declared. He didn't know it yet, but I had already won the first battle. He had underestimated the quiet, methodical woman who balanced the checkbooks. He had mistaken my trust for stupidity. He was about to find out that the person who knows the finances best is the last person you should ever betray. The week that followed his departure was the quietest I had ever known. The barrage of texts and calls from Mark slowed to a trickle and then stopped altogether. An eerie silence that I knew couldn't last. He was likely regrouping, perhaps even foolishly believing that my anger would cool, that my resolve would soften, and that I would eventually call him, weeping, ready to accept his hollow apologies. He had no idea what was coming. I spent those days in a cocoon of purpose, working closely with Anya Davies and the forensic accountant she'd hired, a meticulous man named Mr. Chun. He combed through years of our financial records, his work unearthing a betrayal even more extensive than I had discovered. It wasn't just the second family. It was a slow, steady bleed of 1,000 other selfish cuts. Expensive solo lunches I never knew about, online gambling sites, gadgets and subscriptions sent to a private P.O. box. Mr. Chen's final report put a number to my husband's secret life. Over the last 3 years, Mark had dissipated more than $120,000 of our marital assets. Seeing that number in stark black and white didn't make me cry. It galvanized me. The day we filed was a Tuesday. I had already signed the mountain of paperwork in Anya's office. The petition for divorce was a work of art, a cold, factual document that laid out my husband's adultery and financial infidelity with brutal precision. It included copies of the bank statements, the Amazon receipts, the property records for 114 Maple Drive, and Mr. Chen's damning financial report. It was a mountain of evidence, not just of a failed marriage, but of a calculated long-term fraud. Anya's strategy for serving the papers was as calculated as everything else she did. "We're not having a server show up at his new girlfriend's house and cause a domestic scene," she'd said. "And we are certainly not giving him the satisfaction of a confrontation with you. We are going to treat this as what it is, a business transaction." And so, at precisely 11 a.m. on a Tuesday, a professional process server, a discreet man in a simple suit, walked into the lobby of Mark's prestigious downtown office building and asked the receptionist to inform Mr. Mark Peterson he had a legal delivery. I was at my own desk at work, trying to focus on a spreadsheet, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Anya. "It's done." A wave of something. Not relief, not joy, but a profound sense of finality washed over me. The last tie to my old life had just been formally severed. The Rubicon had been crossed. I braced myself for the incoming storm. Took him 47 minutes. My phone rang, his name flashing on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. I let it go again. A string of furious texts appeared. "Call me, now. What the hell did you do?" I followed Anya's instructions to the letter. I did not engage. I waited. 5 minutes later, the call came from a blocked number. I knew it was him. I took a deep breath, steeled myself, and answered, putting the phone on speaker. "Hello? Are you out of your mind?" He roared, his voice distorted with rage. "You sent a man to my office? In front of everyone? Are you trying to destroy my career? To humiliate me? My voice was placid, almost detached. Hello, Mark. I'm a little busy right now. Busy? You just blew up my life and you're busy? I went to the bank. You drained the accounts. My card was declined at lunch. You took all of our money. I didn't take all of the money, I replied, my tone as even as a news anchor's. I moved my half of our marital assets into a personal account to protect them. It's standard legal procedure. Procedure? This is my life. And this document. These are lies. Slander. You're making me out to be some kind of criminal. Everything in the petition is factual and documented, I said calmly. If you have any issues with it, your lawyer can contact my lawyer. Her information is on the first page. I don't have a lawyer, he screamed, his voice cracking with panic. I have nothing. You left me with a few $1,000s in a checking account. How am I supposed to live? How am I supposed to hire a lawyer when you've stolen everything? That's an interesting question, Mark, I said, and for the first time, a sliver of ice dripped into my voice. I've been asking myself how you thought I was going to live after you stole over $100,000 from our future to fund your secret life. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. He had no answer for that. His entire world, built on the assumption of my ignorance and his control, had been completely and utterly dismantled in the space of a few hours. He was no longer the one holding all the cards. He was exposed, financially crippled, and flailing. The comfortable double life he had so expertly managed had imploded. I could almost picture him, standing on a street corner somewhere, realizing the fantasy was over and the bill had finally come due. The life he had with Sarah, the life built on a lie of him being a wealthy, unattached man, was about to get a harsh dose of reality. You'll have to speak with my attorney, I said again, my voice leaving no room for argument. And then I did something I hadn't done in 12 years of marriage. I hung up on him. I ended the call. The silence that filled my office was the sound of my victory. The storm had hit, and I was still standing. His world was in flames, but for the first time in a long time, my own future felt clear, calm, and entirely my own. The explosive aftermath of serving the papers gave way to the long, grinding war of the divorce itself. The months that followed were a masterclass in ugly legal maneuvering. The fiery, panicked man who had screamed at me over the phone was replaced by a sullen, obstructive adversary, clearly being coached by a lawyer of his own. Every step was a battle. He contested everything. He claimed the $120,000 was a series of loans to a friend and personal investments that I had supposedly approved. He and his lawyer tried to argue that my new solitary bank account was an attempt to hide assets. They filed motion after motion, trying to drag out the process, hoping to bleed me dry emotionally and financially. But I had made a promise to myself. I would not engage. I would not be worn down. I treated the divorce like a hostile business merger, and Anya Davies was my CEO. I forwarded every hostile email to her, ignored every attempt he made to contact me directly, and focused on the one thing I could control, rebuilding my life from the ashes of the old one. My first project was the house. It was legally mine to live in until the settlement, but it still felt contaminated, haunted by the ghost of the man I thought I'd married. So I started an exorcism. It began in the bedroom. I packed up every last item of his clothing, his books, his toiletries, and I donated them. I stripped the bed we had shared and had the mattress professionally hauled away. I bought myself a new one, along with new sheets, a new duvet, in colors he never would have liked. The wedding photos were next. I took them down from the walls, one by one, not with anger or sadness, but with a strange sense of detachment. I didn't smash them. I simply packed them in a box, labeled it evidence, and stored it in the attic for Anya. I went through the whole house like that, a whirlwind of purging. Souvenirs from our trips, gifts he had given me. Every object that was a monument to our shared lie was either thrown out, donated, or packed away. Then I began to rebuild. I hired painters and had the entire interior of the house painted in shades of warm cream and soft green, covering the sterile gray he had insisted on. I sold the heavy, dark leather sofa he loved and bought a comfortable, light-colored sectional that I could curl up on with Gus. I filled the empty spaces on the walls not with pictures of a fake past, but with art from local artists, pieces that made me feel calm and hopeful. Slowly, painstakingly, the house began to transform. It stopped being the scene of a crime and started feeling like a sanctuary. Started feeling like mine. My finances underwent a similar transformation. Living on my own salary for the first time in over a decade was daunting, but it was also incredibly empowering. I created a new budget, one that was entirely my own. There were no hidden expenses, no secret siphoning of funds. Every dollar was accounted for, and every dollar went toward building my new life. The legal battle raged on in the background, but in the foreground, I was reclaiming my independence. The divorce was finalized 10 months after it began. It didn't end in a dramatic courtroom showdown. It ended, as most do, with a settlement. Faced with the undeniable mountain of evidence from the forensic accountant and the threat of a public trial, Mark folded. The final decree was a quiet, decisive victory. The court recognized the full amount of the dissipated assets, counting it against his share of our estate. He was forced to sell the house in Greenfield to pay for his legal fees and begin to pay back his portion of what he'd stolen. When all was said and done, I was awarded our house, free and clear, along with a significant portion of our remaining investments. The day I received the final check from the escrow account, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt a quiet sense of justice. The books were finally balanced. With the legal battle over, the real healing could begin. I had to rediscover the woman I was outside of the context of being Mark's wife. I reconnected with friends I had drifted from, friends who enveloped me in a fierce, loving support system. I started hiking on the weekends, something Mark had always complained was boring. I found a new sense of peace in the quiet rhythm of my own footsteps on a dusty trail. I took a pottery class and found a surprising joy in taking a shapeless lump of clay and creating something new and beautiful with my own hands. One Saturday morning, about a year after he had left, I was sitting on my back porch. The walls of the house were a color I had chosen. The coffee in my mug was a brand I loved. Gus was sleeping at my feet, his tail thumping softly against the deck in his sleep. The silence wasn't lonely anymore. It was peaceful. It was the sound of my own life, unfiltered and uncompromised. A profound sense of calm settled over me. I wasn't just surviving. I was happy. I had walked through the fire of the ultimate betrayal and emerged on the other side. Not broken, but stronger. The ashes of my old life had become the fertile ground for a new one. A life that was smaller, quieter, and infinitely more real. It's been 5 years. 5 years since a man with my husband's face walked out of my house for the last time. 5 years since I sat at my kitchen table and chose to fight for myself. Sometimes, the life I had with Mark feels like a story I read in a book or a movie I once saw about a sad, naive woman who had no idea what was happening in her own home. It's hard to recognize her as the woman I am today. The life I have now is built on a foundation of solid rock, a foundation I laid myself, stone by single, hard-won stone. There are no shared accounts, no blind spots, no willful ignorance. There is only the quiet, sturdy truth of a life that is entirely my own. Looking back, the red flags were there, fluttering in my peripheral vision. They were small and easy to dismiss. The sudden need for him to work late, the way he started guarding his phone like it was a state secret, the slight emotional distance that I had chalked up to stress. I had explained them all away because I was so invested in the beautiful story we had written together. To acknowledge the red flags would have meant acknowledging that the story was a work of fiction. My biggest mistake wasn't trusting him. It was not trusting the small, insistent voice in the back of my own mind, the one that whispered that something was wrong long before I ever saw the charge from Greenfield Market. That voice is your instinct, your gut. It's the truest compass you'll ever have. I've learned to never ignore it again. An experience like this changes you permanently. It leaves scars. I don't think I will ever be able to give someone the kind of absolute, unconditional trust one gave to Mark. There's a part of me that is forever wary now, a sentinel that stands guard at the gates of my heart and my finances. For a long time, I was angry about that. I felt that he had not only stolen my past and my money, but he had also stolen my capacity for unburdened joy and trust in the future. But I've come to see it differently. I've realized that my scars became my armor. The scar is the memory of the wound, a reminder of the pain and the betrayal. It ensures I never forget the lessons I learned. But the armor is the strength that grew over that wound. It's the resilience I discovered in myself, the cold fury turned strategy that allowed me to fight back. My armor is my financial literacy, my insistence on my own independence. It's the deep, unshakable knowledge that I can rely on myself. He taught me, in the most brutal way possible, that I am not a supporting character in someone else's story. I am the lead in my own. The pain was the price of that lesson, and the armor is the gift I get to keep forever. I heard about Mark, of course. In a city this size, you always do. A mutual friend mentioned it a while back. His perfect life in the little blue house imploded not long after our divorce was finalized. Sarah, the other woman, had been sold a fantasy of a wealthy, successful, divorced man. The reality of a bitter, financially ruined man who was still emotionally entangled with an ex-wife and now had to pay hefty child support was not part of the deal. They sold the house. She moved back to her hometown to be near her parents. He, from what I hear, lives in a small apartment across town, struggling to make ends meet. When I heard this, I didn't feel a surge of victory or a bitter, "I told you so." I felt nothing, a profound and peaceful indifference. His life, his choices, his consequences, they had nothing to do with me anymore. He was just a ghost from a past life. If you are listening to this, and if my story resonates with a quiet, uncomfortable hum in your own heart, here is what I want you to know. Trust that hum. That tiny splinter of doubt in your mind is not paranoia. It is information. Knowledge is power. Know your finances. Know the passwords. Read the statements. Ask the questions. Demand to be an equal partner, not just a passenger. Your financial health is inseparable from your personal freedom. And most of all, know that you can survive this. When your world burns down, it feels like the end. But it can also be a clearing, an opportunity to build something new, something that is truly and authentically yours, from the ground up. The fire is terrifying, but it is also cleansing. You will walk out of it with scars, yes, but you will be clad in armor, and you will be ready to build a fortress of your own on your own terms. I finally took that trip to Italy last year. I went alone, and as I stood in front of a masterpiece I had only ever dreamed of seeing, I felt a sense of peace that was deeper than any happiness I had ever known before. It was the feeling of being whole, of being free. The journey from heartbreak to healing is a long one, and it's a path that no one should have to walk alone. The story you just heard is a testament to the incredible resilience of the human spirit. It's a reminder that even in our darkest moments, when the trust we've placed in others is shattered, we can find an unexpected strength within ourselves. It's about transforming pain into power and scars into the very armor that protects us as we move forward. We create these stories not just to share in the drama of betrayal, but to explore the powerful, universal themes of survival, recovery, and the quiet triumph of rebuilding a life on your own terms. If this story touched you, if it made you feel seen, or if it gave you a sense of hope, please consider helping our community grow. By liking this video and subscribing to the channel, you help us reach more people who might need to hear a story just like this one. You help us create a space where these experiences can be shared, and where we can all be reminded that even after the most devastating fire, new life can, and does, begin. Thank you for listening.